Hi, I'm Jess Erb,
And I'm Ryan Bittinger.
and this is Your Therapist Is Not Okay.
On this episode, we're going to be talking about body dysmorphia.
We often hear or experience this as something that clients don't think therapists struggle with. They may have body dysmorphia or struggles with weight or certain aspects of what their body looks like. And they think they come to us sometimes, Ryan, thinking that we don't have this.
Yes, and that's the assumption that we kind of want to push back against a little bit today and talk about some more of the details and complexity about what it's like to be another person in the world with body dysmorphia, whether you're a therapist or not.
I'll be honest with you. I don't think I've met any client that hasn't had something about their body they'd want to change.
Mm.
So, linking this to our experiences, Ryan, have you ever experienced body dysmorphia? And if so, what is it for you?
Gosh, yeah, I really have. It's something that I've struggled with many times and for a long time, in particular as a queer person, as a non-binary person, it is definitely something that comes up for me, I would say periodically. There are many times when it's not going to be something I'm thinking about, and then I'll have periods of time where it's more in the front of my mind,
Mm.
which is really very much what I hear from clients as well. We're having that same kind of experience with our bodies and with what society might expect from our bodies, where there's this kind of push pull between for me at least, I'm comfortable in my own skin
Mm.
and I'm not comfortable in my own skin.
Yeah, it ebbs and flows, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah. There's something I notice about like I want to hide my body or I don't want to hide my body is kind of um, the difference I notice when I'm going through one of those more difficult periods of time.
If I can ask you even maybe a more sensitive question, like what kind of things do you find yourself struggling with in your body? What kind of things do you think that like you might actually be able to bond with clients over?
Um, I think just kind of body shape
Mm.
be a really common one that I hear from, like people wanting to be thinner or people wanting to be um, broader, more muscular or something. Just feeling like there's a silhouette expected of them or their gender that they don't naturally have.
Okay.
And that's kind of like this is the socially idealized form of masculinity or femininity that people would expect. Um, and their body's not that. And that's when I most often hear people talking about like, I wouldn't wear that because it emphasizes this about me. What I hear really often from a lot of gay men, from a lot of kind of trans masc folks as well, is discomfort with their body being large, feeling like they have places where there's too much body.
Oh.
Because those stereotypical, like the celebrated body types are very lean and very
Mm.
square. So any of that kind of like roundness, the curves that would be usually more assigned to femininity are not celebrated.
Mm. I'm thinking about a couple of things, like the photo. If you ever see like like if you had a group photo, you never look at anyone else. You're always paying attention to like how did I look in this photo? But as soon as you said that about gay men, I started thinking about all my friends and their photos, what gets posted on social media. And almost always they have quite a very similar body, and it's exactly that body you're talking about. Like
Mhm.
the body I might show off is the sculpted body, the body I've spent hours to kind of look good enough to be in this photo. And that kind of aspect of like celebration of body for sure, but it seems like it might come at such a cost.
Mm. Yeah, a cost in terms of often, like you said, time spent in the gym, or there can be a big monetary cost with that too, about like being able to afford the gym, time spent with a nutritionist or a trainer, um, as well, and that's just not attainable for everybody, right? And that I've seen that pressure really, I've experienced that pressure, I should say, really push me to unhealthy mental places, and I've seen that many times in friends and clients as well.
Mm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. I think that's what I'm thinking about. You and I did a series on body dysmorphia and pride, and I'm thinking about that right now, specifically of like, what does it mean to have a body that has to be normalized within this particular kind of milieu? I
Mm.
have a pride party every year, and it actually really hurts sometimes to hear how many people have starved themselves to come to this party, to come to Pride as a party, to be able to fit in and show off their body the way that it's expected to them. So I can hear what you're saying when you talk about mask and what it means to actually have this body. And to realize that for you in of yourself, even as a non-binary individual, you also feel some of those pressures of wanting your body to look a certain way.
Absolutely. I do think there can be sometimes an element for people that are gender expansive that don't fall within a binary kind of expectation to also perform a certain level of androgyny, which is not really an accurate, representation of what that day-to-day life might be like. There may be some folks that identify outside the binary that do appear androgynous, either because they've chosen to dress or present themselves in such a way, or because they happen to naturally be androgynous. There are many situations in which I'm just going to look like a dude, right? I've got a beard, I've got broad shoulders. Like if I put on a baseball cap because I haven't done my hair yet, I'm gonna look like a dude.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
look like someone you'd call coach. And that's fine, like, and I think some folks really struggle with then being misgendered
Ah, okay. Yeah.
or, and which is kind of part of the way our society is currently laid out, and part of what a lot of activists are maybe trying to change, whether on a social level or even just in their own daily lives about, having their identities respected.
Mhm.
Yeah. So those are some of those things that I kind of notice come up, and I do work with a lot of clients that I kind of curious about how do I try on something that I think is going to feel really good.
Okay.
Like someone who's assigned female at birth has never really identified as enjoying that,
Mhm.
but normally dresses in a stereotypically feminine way, thinking like, you know what, I want to start wearing suits. I don't know how to wear suits. I don't know where to buy suits that fit me and have a cut that feels masculine instead of looking kind of more like a pantsuit kind of cut that Ellen DeGeneres would wear. Um, so those different silhouettes and different looks and having a space that feels safe to explore it, I think is really important for a lot of clients that I've worked with. And some of that is because I happen to work a lot with a kind of gender expansive community.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Even just thinking about what's the safety look like? How can I start to explore? How can I allow my body to do things that might actually label it as something that is none of anyone else's business but my own, but it still might hurt me.
Mm,
I think about the work I do sometimes with my own female clients, and I find myself in quite a tricky spot because I mean, if you have a cis female body, at least 1 week out of the month, I'm going to feel heavy and like none of my clothes fit and that I'm right before my period. I'm feeling disgusting. I don't feel hot at all. And if a client like is resonating with that or talking about it, it's tricky because that's not dysmorphia, you know? Like that's part of our body fluctuation of us like not feeling as attractive. But I think at the same time, with those hormones, I can kind of tell like and resonate and understand what that feels like on a very intimate level, wanting our body to be at a certain weight because it feels more just comfortable to be in. And I also can feel on a very like personal level what it feels like to kind of look back in time, even if our body was not that different, and idealize a time where our body might have felt thinner. And so it's an interesting thing being a psychotherapist with this topic because it's not one that I wouldn't have any understanding of, right? This is one of those topics where I've never met someone who has a body that hasn't felt discomfort in their body or hasn't wondered, like, if I lost a few pounds, would it be okay? And usually with women, and I definitely feel this myself, thinness is good, is a motif that always comes up. If you're thin, there's a certain value or moral judgment on it that is kind of inescapable, and inescapable for both practitioners, in my opinion, as well as for clients.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I definitely hear that. And I'm curious what you think of this. What I've heard from some women clients, um, and just, women in my life is also like there can be this damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? There's definitely something that people would call too skinny, and
Mm,
there's
yeah.
something that people would call too big. And there's actually a very narrow window in which people will leave you alone about your body, or in which you are the celebrated kind of body shape.
And even with that, there can be fear that we're not going to have friends. Like a lot of women, if you have a very idealized body, it's not uncommon for clients to think, I don't have any female friends because I am a threat to them, or that they think that I have a perfect life. Our bodies denote a lot of information about us. And it's something that I've written about quite a bit because I'm fascinated by it. If we have a perfect body shape, we're striving and striving for that. First of all, I don't think that exists. I've never met somebody, and even in myself, there's never a point where you're like, oh, I'm done. I'm done now. If we try to lose weight, even the bench part we have, well, we'll try to get lower, we'll try to do more. It's it's almost like we're never quite satisfied. When a
Mm.
client like idealizes the past and they're coming back up to tell me like, if only 3 years ago I could have that body, like again, I usually ask them the question like, well, 3 years ago, did you think you had the idealized body? Like, did we celebrate it when we had it? And almost every single time they're like, no, I wanted to be thinner. So we're never really at this place where we just feel completely confident, and I'm generalizing because I'm sure there's people who have, but usually the people in my office and those I'm aware of, generally speaking, there's not really this golden moment because even then we have feelings that we could do better or we could make our bodies better.
When that is thinking about dysmorphia, um, as being something beyond just general discomfort with our body's fluctuations or maybe our natural body shape.
Mhm.
Dysmorphia being that kind of fixation with parts of our body or our body as a whole not ever being okay. Not only not being perfect, but not even being okay. And that's also where we will often witness clients or friends or family members not even perceiving the reality of their body, where they feel like, oh, like this, I can see that this part of me is too big or too small, or gosh, I have tiny biceps. When like, so they're not even able to zoom out and see their body as a whole,
Yep.
or just like you look in the mirror and your eyes go straight to that part to self-judge.
Yeah. I think that's a really good kind of like way of delineating between a body image and body dysmorphia. I think us using the term dysmorphia right now is exactly that definition of there's something wrong with my body, or even the way we distort our view of our body in a mirror that will lead to certain probably eating concerns or disorders. And I think with body image issues, it's the kind of thing where we might be aware that our bodies are like what it looks like, but we're constantly inundated with messages that kind of let us see what kind of comparison our body might have. And so it's maybe not so distorted It's
Mm.
just something that we're constantly living with. That kind of fluctuation you talk about of like sometimes I feel very comfortable in my body, sometimes I don't. I think that would be much more a body image issue than a body dysmorphic issue.
Well, and as you're talking about that, I'm recognizing that this is something that we know a lot about. As you said, you've written a lot about it as well. I've written about it from a kind of angle of queerness as well. And I'm kind of curious, with all the information we have about this, Jess, with all of our education and knowledge, do we still struggle?
I think, yeah, I think we really do. There was a really interesting PhD dissertation in 2001, so it was a while ago, but it's still, I don't know, I always like
2001 was a while ago now.
it was a while
I
ago.
wouldn't have even clocked that.
Shut up.
It's, it's
It's just, a recent article that was written. Ooh. Um, and in the article, 23 years ago, um, it was talking about women with PhDs. So specifically women who had PhDs in psychology, and it was asking them about body image and body kind of dysmorphic feelings. And every single one of them, even though they had a PhD in psychology, have been working with this quite closely, quite like you and I, they said that they still really struggle because the messages are still there every time they open their office door. And I think that's really important. There are so many messages that are inundated with us right now. To speak from a woman's perspective, it's eat whatever you want, girl, you're free, but also have a certain body type. It's like go out with your friends and have cocktails, but also know all the calories in that. So here are all these cocktails that like tell you the calorie percentage. It's like be free in yourself, love your body, and then we'll just still see all these idealized images of bodies. It can be really tricky because as humans, we're prone to comparison. And so I know in my body, when I walk into a room and I might be the biggest body in the room, that's not that's not neutral. Like I'll think about that. And we'll think about like what does it mean? How do we fit? How do we belong? What's our
Hmm,
worth? Like all of these questions are tied to our body. And so I think that that is really tricky.
hmm,
One thing that you said that I think was really important was you said that there are kind of the ways that our bodies are looked at and assessed. And I think that that's really important because there really isn't a size necessarily that won't be assessed or judged or commented on with our body. Um, for you, for example, wearing the fabulous nails you have right now, to what kind of outfit you might put on with a baseball cap. For me, it's being a larger body and wearing a tank top might be much more sexualized than let's say somebody who's quite a thin body wearing a tank top. All of these things have certain messages about what our body is saying. And I think even though we have all this information, it's so hard for us not to have it internalized. And when these messages get internalized in us of how we should look to be pure, to be virtuous, to be moral, to have self-control, all the messages that come into a body that kind of demean it for being outside of a norm, we
mhm,
start to think of it as a personal failing when we don't actually fall into these normative values rather than blaming society. It's much easier for me to think that I ate poorly yesterday, and so I need to be better today than think, where does this narrative come from? When it gets internalized, we start to just think this is my narrative. I've failed something instead of thinking like, what does this aspect of failure even mean?
where does it come from, and why does it feel so aligned with my self-worth?
Hmm.
I like the way you said, like, as soon as we open the door, no matter who we are, whether we're that PhD researcher or a therapist or anyone, that denotes both that impact of society and those expectations that you're describing. And it also harkens to the therapy for me, where it's like in therapy, the door can be closed, so to speak. Like this can be, like I was kind of saying, like this can be a safe space to play with gender expression.
Mhm.
I have um, worked with a lot of both clients and trainees that worked with clients where their client would perhaps choose to try on a type of dress to maybe wear their first dress or wear their first suit and come to therapy in it
Mm,
because they could kind of have a little bit of that experience in a context where they knew they would be safe
mm,
to kind of just have their experience of like this feels good or I kind of felt nervous to be seen and here's why gives those opportunities. So I think being able to close a door, so to
mm.
speak, can be a really important to have that, a safe and sacred space to process body dysmorphia.
And that playing around also can allow you to start to try on new forms of identity,
Hmm.
new forms of safety, but also unsafety of like as you kind of like start to allow yourself to break out of these normative values that might leave you in this kind of space that you're not good enough or that your body is disgusting or it needs to change or something like that. That as we can start to learn ways of changing our body, we can actually start to do that.
Hmm.
That leads me into our final question, for me at least, to ask you. You and I are talking about this aspect that no matter what we do, as soon as we leave the office, we're inundated with messages, um, that we often internalize these messages and they become our fault. That there's really nobody that I know that has somehow like gotten out of this. Even all of our influencers on like TikTok or Instagram, they still talk about how they are faced with these things all the time. No one's really gotten out of it. So what are we doing in therapy to solve this problem, if anything? Can we do anything as therapists? You're talking about the safe space, sure, but what can we do as therapists?
Well, this kind of connects with a couple things that you were talking about already that are the things that I think about. This is really what we're doing about this in therapy. One of them is this notion of it being a personal failure, that we internalize that like I've done something wrong because my body looks this way, or I'm not good enough because my body looks this way. In therapy, we can work on changing that belief,
Mm,
which is slow work in many cases, so that even if that discomfort may still exist, that we can kind of detach my body looks like this from my body and I have value.
mhm,
Um, but I would say to, connect this back with other times we've talked about the idea of mental health in this podcast.
mhm,
It's not a one and done kind of thing. There's not a journey at which, like, at the end of this, I will no longer ever experience body dysmorphia or struggle with my body image, but rather it's more when I notice that I'm struggling with my body image. I
mm,
have this whole set of strategies that I know work for me
yeah.
to take care of myself and be loving towards myself in that, and
Mm,
have those reminders of like, this is not tied to my worth.
yeah.
And having a third party as a therapist be able to reinforce your worth is not about your appearance or you don't have to be a certain body type to be good um can be very helpful. That external reinforcement is a very meaningful one.
Yeah.
I was thinking about something else you had talked about with assessment
Mm,
and thinking about how there's this habit that many people have of, and I share this too, so I'm not only talking about clients with this, of always being assessing others' bodies and their own. And those are kind of mutually reinforcing, where then our brains are in assessment and comparison mode.
mm,
And as we're talking more and more about this, I'm actually realizing that this might need a part two. There's a lot to unpack here, and I think we also want to talk about disordered eating and other things that often come up with dysmorphia as well. What do you think?
I think that's a great idea. Just being able to give ourselves the space. This is a topic that we could have a whole podcast on. And
I,
being able to kind of give it the space that it deserves, I think would be 2 episodes. This first one being like, what are some of the kind of overarching kind of themes and narratives that we're seeing, the comparisons, and then maybe next episode's how we deal with it. Like, what do we actually see in our office coming in? And if we can be vulnerable, we can also share how we deal with it and don't deal with it well, you know?
That sounds great to me.
Okay. Then let's stay tuned for next episode.
This has been Your Therapist Is Not Okay.
Navigating Body Dysmorphia. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, check out our others. And stay tuned for even more episodes coming up.
Follow us and leave a review on Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And please tell your friends.
You can also follow us on Instagram too at Your Therapist Is Not Okay. Also, if you have any questions that you want us to answer, send us a DM there. We would love to answer your questions. And a lot of our topics come from listeners just like you.